Welcome to the Strong for Life podcast. I'm your host, Connor O'Shea, and today I'm joined by Josh Hillis. Josh has been a personal trainer since 2004. He's been publishing on his website since 2007, and he's the author of 2 books to date. He published a book, Fat Less Happens on Mondays, in 2014, I think, with Dan John, and then also Lean and Strong last year. He's also the creator of the GMB Eating Skills program, and is definitely someone I look up to and respect in the industry, and is definitely a thought leader. So Josh, thanks for jumping on today's call. And why don't we start with one of your first jobs, which was door-to-door sales, I think.
Yeah. Man, it's funny to find that out, because that's going way back. I used to talk about it. I used to talk about it when I did trainings for coaches, for personal trainers. Because there were some weird crossovers, like in a way, the way that the companies that I did door-to-door sales for weren't like heavy sales companies. We're more about like talking to lots and lots and lots of people, versus like really heavy sales skills. And so most of it actually was like, how do you deal with the emotions of having, depending on the company, like 95 to 110 people tell you that they hate you every day. And like I used to joke that like like eating skills coaching is easier than coaching door-to-door salespeople, because door-to-door salespeople cry so much more. Like, it was really hard. And so it was an interesting thing. Again, like in a lot of ways, it was just a matter of like, how do I find a way to be with these really uncomfortable emotions? Yeah, it in a strange way, it's kind of similar.
Yeah, and like the reason I wanted to start there is because that would build a huge amount of resilience, I'd imagine, for you starting. Like how old were you then?
Oh man, I was like 20. 20.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because
maybe 19.
yeah.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
did you go into personal training after that?
Yeah. I worked for a bunch of different door-to-door sales companies, like vastly different. And then personal training was kind of like, it was really funny. I didn't think it was going to be a career. I thought it was like, I'm like, okay, door-to-door sales sucked. I mean, like I had moments of being fairly successful, and I really liked like training and I mean, obviously I really liked getting to at the time they said manage people, but it was basically coaching. And so there are elements I liked, but I was looking to do something fun for a little while I figured out what to do with the rest of my life.
Yeah.
And I thought that like after getting into kettlebells and how big a difference that made for my athleticism in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, and finding out that like going from being like the least coordinated, weakest person in every PE class I'd ever been in, to being able to get better a little bit, it just like I was just really getting a kick out of fitness, and I thought it'd be a really fun thing to do for a little while.
Yeah, because I've seen a lot of people who are, successful now when it comes to being self-employed, having kind of an entrepreneurial job or lifestyle, and they've done door-to-door sales as their kind of first thing. And it makes sense, because you must get very okay with rejection in that type of work.
Yeah, like I don't know that it gets more okay. Like it gets easier to. So okay, so there's two things there. There's like so I guess it gets a little bit normalized, right? Like it starts to mean less. And then there's also like getting better at dealing with, there's still hard days. There's still like really emotionally difficult days. And then the other thing that I didn't really get at the time, I didn't really get until me and a friend of mine started our own company, doing door-to-door sales, was how much the community aspect mattered. How it was kind of like being on a team, that like, even though it really, really, really sucked, having other people that it sucked with, like helped make it okay. But yeah, there were definitely lessons around like, like all the like platitudes about it being like a numbers game and things like that. I think I probably do have a different relationship to things working out. You know, like when I first started selling things on online, it didn't really bother me that that things would only go, like 1 out of 4 times. That like, because I mean, going way back, there were a long time ago, I was selling ebooks online, and I'd run different promotions different ways and different products, sometimes mine, sometimes other people. And I didn't really get, like, some people got kind of rattled by like, you run a big promotion and you don't sell anything. But I got used to that, like, okay, if my promotions hit like 1 out of 3 times, 1 out of 4 times, then that's actually a pretty solid, what was a pretty solid supplementary income with my early training career.
Yeah. And you started writing in 2007, is that fact correct?
Yeah. Well, so yeah. That was you did your homework, man. So that was when my first ebook came out. That was when The Stubborn 7 Pounds came out. Right. I wrote it for my clientele at the time, was all super type A people who had gotten somewhere between 5 and 10 pounds of their weight loss goal and wanted to get the rest of the way. And that's just what was showing up at the gym that I worked at the time. And so I wrote a book about that.
Yeah. And then that kind of, over that 7 years, and from then to writing Fat Loss Happens on Monday with Dan John, right?
Yeah, a lot changed.
So how did all that happen? Like, how did that evolution happen? Were you actively writing through the 7 years, and then you just said, look, I have an idea for a book and I'm going to put it out there? Or how did that process occur?
Yeah. So I started blogging in like 2004. I actually started blogging earlier than that, but like my earlier blogs were kind of silly. But I started blogging about fitness, which is funny because like I was a brand new trainer and I'm like, I'm just gonna write about, here's what I'm learning, or here might be how to get started, or it was I was trying to be humble because I had some sense of not knowing what I was doing. And so then that ebook was kind of like a way to that first ebook was a way to like kind of start like how can I monetize this, right? Like I'm starting to get some traction. Some of the things that I was saying about behavioral weight loss were pretty unique in the kettlebell community, and so I got a lot of traction there. But then between that ebook and the other book, I was blogging constantly. Like and I had some blog posts that really hit. I wrote a blog post about the 300 workout that got like 2 million visitors. Like,
wow,
like it was
crazy.
It was silly. I was really, really early on the celebrity fitness kind of blogging, and that got a lot of traction back in the day. That's a lot more crowded marketplace for eyeballs now, but at the time it wasn't. But the entire time I was at least blogging. I put out 2 more ebooks. There was an ebook that Dan John actually sat down with me, and he got a chance to sit down with Dan, and he was like, hey, tell me about your career. Can I try running the workshop that he was doing at the time? Was that first assessment workshop. And he's like, can I run your career through my assessments that I normally get? And I'm like, sure. And we just sat down and talked for like a half hour. And then he wrote down on like a half sheet of paper, he's like, okay, here's what you told me that's unique, and you should write a book about that. And it was like, habit-based nutrition. It was what he calls park bench workouts, which is like really chill workouts where you're not really trying to get to a goal. And the whole idea was he distilled what I was doing down to workouts are kind of chill, putting the nutrition first, habits, food journal. And that was an ebook that didn't do very well. But Dan liked it. He helped me get the publishing deal, and that later became Fat Loss Happens on Monday. And the same way that like he sat down with me that first time and he was like, okay, you said all these things, focus just on this. When it came to do the other book, he took that ebook and he was like, okay, this ebook says all these things, throw out 70% of it and expand on this 30% that's really, really good. And that was probably the most useful thing ever, to have someone say like, hey, you got all these things and most of it's okay. But like, here's the thing that actually is unique and different and valuable, and you should really just focus on that. And ironically, that goes into like then writing the book and having it edited and going through multiple rounds of editing. A lot of it's about cutting the stuff that's mediocre to okay.
Yeah. It's funny you said that as well. Like Dan John, just when I think of him, he is just a master of just cutting everything down to the very minimalistic approach, and it's just, you know, beneficial information. And
he has a gift.
Yeah. And that book was so helpful for me when I was working. I was working in Melbourne. I used that book as like a framework for my business. And and it was so clearly written by someone who was actively working in the trenches, because a lot of the, you know, certifications and tests that you're taught to be a PT, they don't really work in a PT environment a lot of the times.
Yeah, like it's kind of weird a little bit how like it's not just yeah, like a lot of the certification stuff, it's not just that it's academic. It does seem removed from like anyone's actually like, I'm like, it's clear that people haven't used it with clients, which is always disappointing. Which is always super disappointing.
So also one thing I appreciate is you've changed your approach now in recent years from what you did in that book to your most recent book and what you're talking about. And you're very vocal and open about like, hey, I've found a better way to do stuff. And I think that's really a great trait, because a lot of the times, especially if you've written a book, that's a lot of buy-in to have in a certain like approach. So do you want to talk about how that happened and how you feel about that?
It is, so it's kind of weird because I mean especially having Dan to co-write the book with that book got a lot of that first book got a lot of traction, but also it's at the time that it came out, it was like one step more innovative than how most trainers were coaching nutrition, right? Or coaching eating behavior change. And so it was very well received. And the new book is like 5 steps removed from that. And it's a little bit like I'm stepping away from something that a lot of people felt very comfortable with. And so it is hard to say like, hey, you know what, that worked for a subset of people. And that's actually why I changed, right? Everything I've done worked for some group of people. You know, like the stuff in Fat Loss Happens on Monday it's kind of, now I wouldn't have at the time I called it a habit-based approach, but looking back, it was kind of like flexible dieting. You know, you're food journaling, you're counting calories, and I was trying to pull out of that behaviors, and I called them habits at the time. But so I was trying to pull out these habits, and I was looking at like, okay, so keeping a food journal works, and pulling out the habits seems to be more effective than like completely focusing on the food. And that worked for the clientele that I had at the time, the clientele that was like fairly athletic, you know, like I was getting clientele that everyone worked out, and everyone was pretty solid with working out. Everyone had done a bunch of diets and been somewhat successful. like not so successful that they didn't need something a little bit more flexible, but they'd all been a little bit successful. And that just isn't everyone, right? There were still clients that would show up that I couldn't help. There were still clients that like emotionally ate and stress ate, and like that stuff wasn't helping. Sometimes it even looked like it made it worse. And I was like,
Right.
I need a better tool set. I need a different tool set from that. And it really helped to work with Georgie Fear for a few years. Her stuff on hunger and fullness-based eating like completely changed the way I coach. That was so impactful. And I'm like, okay, so with this stuff, I can reach so many more people. And we could help people that the other stuff didn't help. That was cool. Ran into acceptance and commitment therapy, found some research on, or in my case, acceptance commitment coaching, but most of the research is on acceptance commitment therapy or acceptance-based behavioral weight loss. But like finding that research and getting all of the stuff on like values and being with emotions, and then running into like self-transformation theory. Stephen Ledbetter led a big movement in the fitness world around self-transformation theory and intrinsic motivation. And he turned me on to SDT and like getting a look at like what the conditions are where intrinsic motivation can show up. And all these different tools started coming in, and I was able to help more people and more people and more people. And then the last piece before Lean and Strong, before the last book came out, was I took a look at how much time I spent scaffolding the hunger and fullness based eating. That I wasn't just teaching those skills. I was putting in these structures that made it easier to learn those, right? Because learning hunger and fullness cues is like, that's those are hard skills to learn, right?
Yeah.
And so I was putting in other things to make that easier, and all that kind of came together into the system that I've got now.
Yeah.
And it all just came to like, how do I help more people? Like there's deficiencies in what I was doing. How do I help more people?
Yeah, there's a few different ways I want to go now with that. And I guess first of all, how did you decide? Because I went through eating skills last year and I found it really helpful for me personally, but also for me as a coach. I'm using a lot of the stuff in my coaching with people as well.
Yeah.
How did you decide what to pick and what to like, where to start with everything? Like what skill, how to, 1 to 10, or how did you pick the first thing to as being the most effective way to get the most amount of people on the right road from the beginning?
So how I chose it at the time is different from how I choose it now. At the time, what I was choosing was, what I was thinking was, okay, the system's drastically different from anything else people have ever seen before. I need to lead with the guidelines that are going to have cause the biggest impact the fastest.
Mm-hmm.
And so for people listening, now I've got guidelines and I've got skills. So a skill would be like distinguishing hunger from stress, or like noticing that I'm getting full during a meal. Whereas a guideline would be like pausing 10 minutes before having a snack, or like putting your fork down between bites. So they pair. One is like a really concrete, obvious behavioral thing. The other one is like, how do I check in with myself? And so the program always starts off with more guidelines than skills, right? Guidelines are really concrete. They're easy to track and to know that you did them. And then it gets less and less guidelines and more skills over time. The guidelines that I started off the GMB Eating Skills program with were plating balanced meals and 4 to 6 hours between meals without snacking. that's those, I put those in because they kind of answer all of the initial questions that people have, like when should I eat, or what should my plates look, or all of the concerns they have coming from diet world. That gives them structure to start with, right? Also, if you balance meals, that sorts out like all the questions about like what to eat, how much to eat, and like that. If half your plate's fruit and vegetables, you're crowding out a lot of stuff. If you're getting some protein, like if quarter of the plate's protein, quarter of the plate's carbohydrates, you got like super fat, and then the 4 to 6 hours between meals kind of answers like when do I eat, and what do I do about snacking, and like that. I'm going to actually change that. I'm going to actually change that, where 4 to 6 hours between meals is sort of like a bigger, like overarching framework for learning to check in. And because the whole, it isn't a rule. It isn't like you can't eat between meals. It's that we're shifting the default from I have a snack whenever I want it to, if it's been 4 to 6 hours between meals, I need to check in and see if I'm hungry, or if I'm stressed out, or if I just want it, right? And if I just want it, then I can choose, do I eat it or not? If I'm hungry, then I probably eat, but I also need to look at like, are my meals too small? And if I'm just stressed out, I get to look at like, how do I want to deal with that? And there are 3 skills for that too. But that's asking people to not turn that into a rule in the very beginning is, I think, too big of an ask. Like if they're coming from diet world, people are going to turn that into a rule. So not a rule. So we're just not going to start there anymore. I'm still going to start with plating balanced-ish meals, because until we put that in, people are always like, what do I eat? What do I eat? What do I, you know, like it's the least important thing, but like until we answer that, like people don't hear anything else. And then instead of 4 to 6 hours between meals, we're just going to do pausing 10 minutes before snacking, because that achieves the same thing. It creates a structure where we check in, but it's not as easy to turn into a rule.
Yeah, that pausing 10 minutes was the best part of the eating skills program for me. And I can just see how you can use that in so many ways. Like, of course, with food, but like with technology, I think is a huge thing as well. You could use it for with like, you know, you're constantly being pulled to like, oh, I'm just going to check my phone, just going to check Instagram. And that kind of like, it's like you're building a muscle of like stopping yourself from that impulse or impulse control. And and what I love about it as well is it's very much another huge thing that I found really helpful was like, it's not like do it every time or do it 100% of the time. You're like, okay, if you're going to be eating 3 times a day, that's 21 times a week. So just maybe do 7 or 14 times a week as your option. So do you want to maybe just kind of go into that in a bit more detail? I think that's a really interesting skill for people to understand a bit more.
Yeah. So the one of the ways that we break up the whole perfectionism thing is that, so anyone coming from diet world, they're going to have that thing, like anything that they're doing, they have to do it 100% of the time. And like you just said, if that's 3 meals a day, that would be 21 times a week. So at the very beginning of every week, we have people plan how often they're going to practice something, and we have them plan less than 21 times, right? So if you're never planning to do 100% of the time, you're actually practicing not being a perfectionist every single week. And so if it's a new skill or a new guideline, it seems really hard. Like you said, maybe you practice once a day, 7 times a week, right? That gives you 14 meals that you're not practicing. That's a lot of not doing it. That's like in the plan. And then a lot of things, I mean, like if you're practicing a lot of this stuff 14 times per week, you're probably going to hit your goals anyway. Like most people don't need to get to 21 times per week. They don't need to get to 100%. And so we set up the thing from the very, very, very beginning that every week you're planning to do a portion of the times available to you, right? And that you might look at how hard is the skill or guideline, or you might look at is my week really busy and stressful, or is my week really chill? And when people get that they can do less on really, really stressful weeks, but still stay in it, then they get everything, right? Because normally people do 100% until life happens, and then they do 0.
Yeah.
And if we can play the game of doing like 70% until life happens, and then you do like 30%, and then you come
Yeah.
back to like 60 or 70 or 80, you know, like then people have a program that actually fits into their life.
Yeah, that's basically the magic right there to maintain something long term. It's something I ask my clients always on our first consultation is, on your week from hell, everything's going wrong, your work, your finances, your relationships, everything's just really bad. What can you still show up and do that week? And I get them to make a really small commitment. They're like, yeah, I can probably do 2 to 3 15-minute workouts. I'm like, great, that's your baseline, and we're just going to kind of start there. Everything above that's a win, basically.
That's a great setup. That is such a great setup.
Yeah. And of course they're always like, but I could probably do 4-hour sessions, and I'm like, let's stick with 15 minutes.
Well, I love that you set that up as that's their baseline. That's such a cool way to put it, right? And so they're like, they've got this like foundation, and they can do more, but they've got this like foundation that like they can always do. That's glorious.
Good stuff. So I think an interesting thing to discuss with you as well would be looking at the fitness industry. You've been in the industry for quite a while now, especially I think the first 3 years, there's like a massive 70% dropout rate for a lot of trainers. You've been training since 2004, which is amazing. But like the industry was kind of built on the foundation of like bodybuilders, and then bodybuilders started training people, and then like an interesting thing that I've been thinking about a lot recently, like if you're a bodybuilder, you're pretty extreme in your behavior. You're probably training really intensely, you're going through, depriving yourself, and you're pretty good at that. And then you're also potentially like self-employed or an entrepreneur because you're a fitness professional. So again, it's a bit of an extreme path as well. And that type of personality in general, like it would attract quite a more maybe extreme than some general population person. And a lot of the underlying ideas and rules is coming from that population. So do you want to maybe talk about that in a bit of detail? I think it'd be interesting to hear your opinion on that.
Yeah. I mean, you're totally right. And even as the industry's changed, right? Like we had like I think at this point most trainers probably aren't semi-pro bodybuilders anymore, but it still tends to attract people that are athletes or former athletes, or fitness is their absolute favorite hobby, or they're into it because it's the best thing that it's the thing that they're best at in the world. And so the big issue is that we are the opposite of our clients. Almost everyone, almost all the gurus, almost all the authors, almost all it's all people who fall into that narrow band of like doing fitness for fun, even like doing nutrition for fun, being really good at it. It's like if you, it's really hard to nail down percentages of how many people diets work for, right? But it's a minority of people, and all of the authors that are creating diets are in that group, and most trainers fall into that group. It could be potentially as high as 30%, but it's probably more like 15% or less. And there, like I said, there's a bunch of issues in trying to nail it down, mostly because people that fail in diet trials are the ones that don't show back up for like follow-up research. But we know that it's absolutely a minority of people, but everything's population dependent. And so you've got this population of people that are extremely high responders to exercise. They're coordinated, they do well on diets, and they are and our clients are usually nothing like that. Our clients typically tend to be the people that might have like higher scores on like for like emotional eating or food reactivity. They're people that are probably hiring us because they have a hard time working out, like without having someone to go see. They're literally the opposite of us in every way, right? It's kind of like if we went to our CPA and our CPA expected us to also be a CPA. Most trainers and authors are kind of like writing for themselves.
Yeah.
And it's they're writing for the wrong population, basically.
Yeah, and it's an interesting one because, like, looking at someone like David Goggins, who's he really is very motivational when you see his videos. But then I'm just thinking, if I put my clients through what he's recommending, they're going to break in two, and they're not going to be able to do it. And I think it's similar with a lot of nutrition advice. And I'm someone who, I've tried the carnivore diet for health reasons. I had a lot of mouth ulcers throughout my life, and that was actually the one thing that helped. But if your goal is body composition, I think it's a terrible idea. Like, if you just want to lose some weight, and kind of also looking at it through the lens of like skills. If someone was coming into the gym with you tomorrow, you're not going to work on one arm chin-ups and handstand push-ups with some mom who hasn't trained in 10 years. You're going to start with where she's at. And I think a lot of the nutrition advice can start people on step 10 or 11 when they're only ready for step 1.
Yeah. And they might be people like it starts on step 10 or 11 when they're on step 1. And in their lifetime, they may only ever even need to work up to step 7 to hit all their goals, like the other thing that's really funny about most of the people talking about nutrition is that they're talking about optimal nutrition, right? Mm-hmm. They're talking about like the absolute best diet for either sports performance or body composition or longevity or whatever, when in reality most people need something better than something like a little bit better than average.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And going on to that point, I'd like to discuss with you about recommendations for someone. So let's just say someone is just trying to drop like 10-15 pounds. They've got 2 kids. There's a guy in his, let's just say, in his 30s. That's population number 1. And then the other person is has autoimmune issues, and they're like I was getting reoccurring mouth ulcers like all the time. It was just like driving me crazy. Or they have
reoccurring what?
Mouth ulcers.
Oh, mouth ulcers. Okay, yeah. That's no fun.
No, like affecting how I could, energy levels, ability to eat, all these
things.
Oh, yeah. So like, what would be your kind of recommendations? And then for the autoimmune kind of candidate, how do you maintain a healthy relation with food if you are going to be kind of going into a pretty strict elimination phase?
Yeah, wow. Okay. So let's do one at a time. So the first one, busy dad in his 30s is what, right? He wants to lose 15-20 pounds. He said something like that.
Yeah.
So he comes to me, he wants to lose weight. Basically, I'd basically like, so I've got a little assessment where I look at his eating skills and see like, do you eat fast? Do you eat slow? Do you eat balanced meals? Do you stop when you're, like all the kinds of, and we see where he's at. Most people, most guys, if we worked on balancing his meals a little bit, that would help, right? Because the thing about balanced meals is that they make it easier to notice when you're getting full, right? Like protein, carbohydrates, and fiber or vegetables make it easier to notice when you're full during a meal, and protein, fat, and vegetables make it easier to stay full between meals. So if we worked kind of towards something like Harvard School of Public Health's healthy eating plate, which is like half the plate vegetables, quarter protein, quarter carbohydrates, tablespoon of fat. If we were kind of get in that neighborhood, like somewhere in that neighborhood, doesn't have to be perfect. If we get a little bit more balanced, he's probably gonna feel more full. We're gonna take a look at snacking. We're gonna, so like we're saying before, pause 10 minutes before snacks. In that 10 minutes, we're gonna put in some checking in. Do I feel a hollow feeling in my stomach? Do I feel hungry for like a balanced meal or healthy food, or do I just want the specific treat? And if I pause, does it build or does it fade? And then also then like going back to meals, we'll probably like put the fork down between bites, like have a behavior that slows it down. Or if it's more comfortable for him to not put food in his mouth while he's still chewing the last bite. Like, so we're doing these things to make it easier to notice when full and stop. And then lastly, we might work on, between meals, like what's going on, if he's finding himself repeatedly like wanting snacks and he isn't hungry, right? We're gonna check in. We're gonna find out, like, are you stressed out? Do you just need a break at work? Do you, what's going on? And then do we need to find a way to be able to get some perspective on and be with stress or be with those uncomfortable thoughts, or to be with cravings? Or do we need to put in taking a break? Do we need to put in, some kind of little bit of self-care, or both?
Yeah. With that, because are you finished studying your degree now? You're
No.
studying you're still doing it, yeah?
Yeah.
So
yeah,
when
it's going it's going slowly while writing books and working with clients, and it's going slowly. I'm making progress, but like everyone's like, are you done yet? No.
So I asked that point because you deal a lot with like emotional eating. There's clearly stuff going to be going on there from a mental health point of view, I'm guessing. So do you have like a scope of practice or something that you'd recommend for trainers? Because if you start digging into like, okay, why are you pacifying yourself with food, and you start digging down, and stuff comes up that maybe you're not in a position that you're qualified to help them in, like, how do you navigate that? Do you refer out, and what would you recommend for a trainer in that position?
That's a phenomenal question. I'm just a coach. I don't dig.
Yeah.
Right. I don't dig into the past, and I'm not trying to like process anything. I'm teaching skills, and the skills that I'm teaching are basically the skills around that. The skills that we're looking at are, how do I check in with myself and see if I'm actually hungry? And then another skill is unhooking or cognitive diffusion. And I actually wrote an article for the Association of Contextual Behavioral Science about coaching using acceptance and commitment training skills within a coaching scope of practice. So if anyone wants to look at that.
Can you explain what hooking means?
Oh, unhook. Yeah.
Unhooking.
I'm getting there. Unhooking, or the technical term is cognitive diffusion. But basically we get hooked by thoughts or emotions or bodily sensations or cravings. Being hooked is when your thoughts feel really true, or emotions feel like they're kind of running away with you, or like cravings feel like you have to eat right now. Being unhooked is getting a little bit of distance. It's getting a little bit of perspective. It could be looked at like mindfulness. It's looking at your thoughts like they are on TV, or noticing your thoughts as just thoughts, or labeling them, or like naming your emotions, like noticing like, oh, right now I feel really frustrated. This is what happened. I feel really frustrated. Or I feel really sad, or I feel really, or I'm mad, or whatever you feel. Noticing the bodily sensations, like, oh, I've got a hollow feeling in my stomach, or you know what, I don't have a hollow feeling in my stomach, but I'm really tight in my shoulders, you know. And then so the skill that we're learning is that is how to notice thoughts, notice emotions, notice bodily sensations, and notice cravings, and be able to get a little bit of perspective on them. And we actually can teach that skill. That skill has been taught effectively for use with snacking by undergraduates. It's been taught on recordings. It's been taught effectively in workshops. It's we can teach people that it's okay to feel, it's okay to feel your feelings, and it's okay to notice like not every thought that I have is useful. I've got lots of thoughts. Some are really useful. Some are like, they aren't wrong. I don't need to change them, but they're just not useful. They might not even, you know, like, and you know, you can, some clients will be like, oh, you know what? That's a thought that someone told me in junior high. Or like, this thought I'm having is like something that my friend told me about dieting. Or like, this is something, you know, like sometimes even go like, oh, that isn't even like original. That isn't like from me. Like, that's just something, you know. So people can check in, and we don't need to dig into people's past. We don't need to do anything. I'm going to be like, here's how to check in, and they can check in on their own and see what they learn. And then the other thing that's within our scope of practice is to help them explore their values and just have them reflect on what really matters to them and the kind of person they want to be. I use values in a really specific way, which is to mean like a character strength. So like, if you look at the different areas of your life, you're like, oh, okay, family, fitness, career, friend, you know, social, like, who do I want to be in those areas of life? Do I want to be like compassionate? Do I want to be conscientious? Do I want to be wise? Do I want to be connected? And then they get to say what the actions that match those are. And then we get really, it's really cool because they can be like, okay, you know what? I'm not going to eat that muffin because I'm connected to myself. And when I checked in, I realized I was just bored. But I am going to have that. I am going to have a chocolate sundae with my friend on Saturday afternoon because it's a cool way to connect with my friend. And they can make like values-based, real concrete decisions. And so those are the kinds of skills that we're teaching, and that keeps us within the scope of practice. But if anyone feels like they're getting out of their depth, if a client feels like they need to dig in on previous stuff, if they're like, oh, you know what, I feel like this is really related to my trauma history, or if they're like, or if it starts to sound like disordered eating, or like all of those things, refer out, find someone that's an eating disorder specialist, either a registered dietitian or a therapist that's an eating disorder specialist.
Yeah, great answer. And what you are teaching as well, I think, is such an important skill for us all, is ability to sit with difficult emotions and not, I think it's just autopilot mode. I know personally, I'll be just like, you know, just gorging on my stress food is definitely Mexican food. That's like
delicious. Love it.
Like nachos, loaded nachos or something like that. And I'm just like, what am I doing? I'm just shoving down these emotions, you know?
Oh yeah.
So I think it's, you know, when you do create that space, and that was a huge thing with the eating skills program as well, like pausing 10 minutes and then choosing a self-care activity instead as an alternative. That is just such a, you can scale that into pretty much every area of your life as well. Whatever the negative behavior that you're going towards, pausing 10 minutes before that and then choosing something that's going to serve you better. I just can't see a better skill to work on for basically everyone in the world, you know?
Well, so like one of the things that's interesting is that, like, looking at contextual behavioral science, skills for like checking in with yourself and getting some perspective on your thoughts, and choosing a value-based action really does apply to a lot of things. I stick mostly to eating behavior, but yeah, you could apply it to a lot of things. I actually have a client right now that's she wanted to use the exact same skills for snacking and for, like you brought up earlier, social media. So she's actually doing exactly what you said, where she's pausing 10 minutes and then choosing whether or not she wants to hop on social media. And it's cool because, like, you know, like we talked about, like you can actually say yes, you can actually say like, I want to be on social media, but it's about giving ourselves time to actually consider and choose.
Yeah.
And it's really like, for me with social media, it's really funny how many times like I have an uncomfortable feeling and I'll pick up Facebook and like quick, like doom scroll, like don't feel that, you know. It's a trip.
Yeah, it's amazing. I think it's only going to become more of an important skill as well, like looking at, you know, the way things are going to be in the next decade with technology. It's going to be even more of a difficult thing to pull yourself out of. And I think that the more you can kind of focus on stuff, step away if you need to, and not just be on autopilot, that's going to be just a huge thing, I think, for basically everyone out there.
Yeah.
Okay, so looking as well, just on the kind of mental health realm, with regards to social media, with regards to kind of disordered eating, with regards to unrealistic body aspirations, you know, Instagram is a perfect example. You go onto Instagram and everyone is like perfect looking and they can do ridiculous stuff from a strength point of view, and they're all models, and you're like, oh wow, this is what everyone in the world is like except for me. I'm pathetic. So like how like, what do you think about that? What do you think is a kind of a good way to use that technology? Because of course, you know, the internet's amazing. We're talking now because of the internet. I've connected and learned so much from social media, but also you can get trapped in like comparison, and just especially I think in the body composition world, it's kind of, I can't see that being a healthy thing long term, looking at that every day.
So yeah, there's everything's population dependent. We know that we just saw that all those leaked Facebook internal memos that that Facebook, or now Meta Corporation, their internal research showed that for teenage girls that had that were predisposed to body image issues, that Instagram made it significantly worse. And so like their research showed that there's a lot of research on what kinds of factors influence that, like the way that like our expectations about body composition changing, like the way it would change our life, or the way that we relate to like celebrities, including including influencers. There are a lot of different factors, and I just bring that up because everything really is population dependent. There's a population of people that looking at certain accounts on Instagram is really going to wreck them, and there are other populations of people where it doesn't. And so it's one of those things where if you're one of those people where after you look at Instagram you feel worse about yourself, then like it would probably be really effective to curate your feed, right? It would be like either limit your time and or change what kinds of accounts you're going to. The accounts that always make you feel bad, maybe cut those out. You know, you don't have to follow anyone. I know a lot of people in fitness that stopped following their friends, right? They have friends that are big fitness influencers, and they're like, you know what, I feel bad looking at their workouts and their bodies and their everything, right? When I was working on handstands, I got to a point where seeing other people do handstands just like made me feel terrible.
Mhm.
Like, so I mean, same thing with fitness. And so I pulled it all out. I replaced it all with cutting shapes and shuffle dancing.
That's
And then I
great.
started doing that.
Yeah.
But the funny thing is, like, for whatever reason, when I looked at people doing handstands, it made me feel bad about how badly my handstands were going. And even starting from scratch, shuffle dancing, when I see other people dance, it's just like fun and inspiring.
Mhm.
And so it's not always even like the same. And that's a really long and winded way of saying, like, the accounts that make you feel bad, you should cut. And there's a really strong movement of like alternative fitness influencers that you could look for. You could find other people that either have a variety of different body shapes, a variety of different kinds of fitness, or they present themselves and talk about themselves, or they present themselves and talk about fitness in much more inclusive ways. And they have smaller followings, so it would be better. It would be great for us to like go and support them.
Yeah.
And I wish I could say who they were, but I stopped following pretty much all fitness people.
Oh, wow.
I mean, like I still follow my friends, but the
Yeah.
reality, I mean, the reality is when I go on Instagram now, I'm mostly seeing people dance. And when I go on TikTok, I'm seeing people lip sync comedy. You know, I mean, like, it's weird even saying that out loud, because I feel like I should have some like professional responsibility to keep up with the
Yeah.
other fitness people,
Yeah.
but I don't.
Exactly. Yeah. And that's a really good point. Like John Berardi said something similar about social media a while back. Just whatever you click and respond to, it's going to show you more of. So if you're
Yeah.
online getting outraged all the time, well, you can curate your feed just like you've said and have a much more pleasant experience, and just make it work for you. So I'm aware of time now, but I just want to circle back to the
I never answered the autoimmune question.
Exactly.
Yeah. Okay. So really interesting question, because so first off, for everyone listening, I can't speak to autoimmune issues at all, because I don't do that. But in terms of like behavior and well-being and relating to different kinds of like rules versus guidelines versus skills, a lot of people have asked me like, hey, you know, like, I can't eat these foods. Is that a rule? Is that going to be like damaging to my well-being? And even myself, I have a lot of food issues. I've got some digestive issues, and there are things I can't eat, and I have some weird allergies, and there's stuff I just can't have. So this is where everything is context dependent. Everything is context dependent. And so two people can do the exact same thing and relate to it in completely different ways, right? It just like the person that has the chocolate chip cookie that their kids baked, but they skipped the chocolate chip cookie that they wanted to have just because they were stressed out. One person can say, I'm never going to eat carbs because I'm afraid I'll gain weight, or I'm afraid of what, you know, like, and the other person can say, you know what, I've got celiac disease and I'm never going to have gluten because I get violently ill. The context for one is related to body image, and it's related to like, will it help my like contingent self-esteem? Will it, like, am I using this to prop myself up, or am I afraid of gaining weight and not being accepted, or do, you know, like, there's all that stuff wrapped up in one. And in the other one, it's just, I don't want to feel bad, so I'm not going to eat that. Right? There are foods I don't have any like, I'm not like afraid of specific foods because I'm going to gain weight or because I'm not going to look good. But there are foods I don't eat because I don't want to projectile vomit. Right?
I think you answered that for me as well. It's dairy, is it, that causes you to projectile vomit?
Yeah. It's not cool. It's really not cool. Looks cool in the movies. It's not cool in real life. So it's one of those things where could look like the same behavior on the outside, drastically different experience. You just don't want to feel bad. That's okay. That's actually internally driven. You're actually like checking in with yourself. You're like, I want to feel good. That's so it doesn't have an impact on your well-being to avoid foods that you can't eat.
Yeah, that's a really good framing, and it's something I've definitely struggled with a lot, with just having to eliminate stuff and then wish, oh, he can eat this or she can eat this and I can't. This sucks. And
it does suck.
Yeah. Yeah.
It does suck.
But I think owning it in the sense that it's just, it doesn't make me feel good. It doesn't really, it makes me feel ill, and my quality of life is, it wrecks my quality of life when I have 5 mouth ulcers. So
that sucks.
So I'm just I'd like to finish with some rapid fire questions.
Yeah.
All right. So what book have you gifted the most, or what is your favorite book?
Ooh. So the book that I recommend to everyone is The Happiness Trap by Russ Harris. It is like the most readable book on acceptance and commitment therapy there is. It's a really, like, if someone's like, hey, how do I learn how to be with uncomfortable emotions and thoughts and like that, it's the book to read. If anyone's interested in emotional eating, it's the book to read. Does not mention food at all. But if you want to learn how to be with emotions, it's the book.
Okay, great. And given the choice of anyone in the world, who would you want as a dinner guest?
So I just saw this video of Steve Jobs that was so brilliant. It was so smart that I would love to say Steve Jobs, but he's gone. So who do I choose?
Live or dead? Live or dead?
Live or dead? Oh, okay. Steve Jobs. Like, I just saw this video where he was talking about discarding. He actually got like almost like heckled at this like Apple developer conference for throwing away this piece of technology that apparently was really cool. And he was talking about how like they just like how the thing is to start with what makes a difference for the customer and work backwards. And they worked backwards. They didn't get to that technology. And it was all about making it simpler, easier, better for what the customers already wanted. And I was like, that's a place where I feel like I fall down, and the fitness industry falls down a lot, where it's like, hey, here's this thing that's cool. It's totally unrelated to the problems and you have and the things that you want. But I would just love to talk to him about that, like, forever.
Yeah. It's like user experience and something that's valuable for people. Is that what you mean with the fitness industry?
Yeah. Like at my best, I am speaking to a problem that clients actually have that's like top of mind for them. And there's a tendency to go down rabbit holes of like, oh, here's this really cool thing that I found, or here's this, or like, I'm studying this, like, I'm studying contextual behavioral science, and here's this thing I learned, and I would love to talk about that. But how far am I getting away from, like, here's what's going to make a difference for you right now? And it kind of comes back to, like, in the fitness industry, I see a lot where like a personal trainer will take like 7 workshops on like training elite athletes and like none about like the average,
Yeah. And then it's all, I want to utilize all this workshop knowledge now, even though it's got nothing to do with your goals, but I need to use it.
Exactly.
Do plyometric jumps with sandbags and all this kind of stuff.
Yeah. It's a first session, but we're doing depth jumps.
Yeah. So next one, what if you could wake up tomorrow having gained any one quality or ability, what would it be?
Teleportation.
Where would you go?
What were you thinking real life? So I would get, so I would go to lunch all over the world every day. I would, nice. Like tomorrow I'd have lunch in Italy. I'd have lunch in Puerto Rico the next day. Have lunch in Brazil the day after that. That sounds really ridiculous, but I totally would. And of course I'd go see all the things, right? I'd go see jungles, museums, and music and family, and like I think that would be amazing, amazing, amazing.
Very good. What is
The
your
beach.
greatest?
Oh, I'd go to the beach all the time.
What's your greatest accomplishment of your life?
So I mean, my first thought is like marrying my wife Valerie, like is like the biggest, best thing, but it's not really an accomplishment. I feel like I stumbled into it. Like it's like finding someone that I fit really well with is really just dumb luck. Like like we really just fit really well, and I don't know how I stumbled into her out of like 7 billion people, but I did. Professionally, I'd say that last book, just the amount of research that went into it and the number of citations, and that it's all like evidence-based. I felt really, really good about that.
Yeah, for sure. Okay. Last question. If you could put anything on a billboard in somewhere like Times Square, or on a billboard where it's going to reach millions of people, what would it be?
It's okay to feel your feelings, that the full spectrum of human emotions is normal. And regardless of what you see on social media, like everyone's up sometimes and down other times.
That's a really good message. And I think that's a good way to end today's podcast. Thanks so much for taking time and joining me, my man.
Thanks. This is so much fun.
Awesome.